Church discipline. Spiritual leaders are responsible to confront false prophets who lead people astray. Here's Gene to explain.
You really see this in Jesus' words in this letter. Geographically, Thyatira is located about 40 miles from Pergamum, and you'll notice that at this point in time, the journey, and this is really a well-traveled route, where the letter was probably delivered in this sequence from Ephesus to Smyrna to Pergamum, and then about 40 miles doing a right turn and going to the city of Thyatira. Not as large a city as some of these other cities, but a very influential city. And so we read in Revelation chapter 2, verse 18, "To the angel of the church in Thyatira write, the Son of God." And by the way, this is the first time and the only time in the book of Revelation that Jesus Christ is called the Son of God. We met him earlier as the Son of Man, the one who came and dwelt among us, the Word become flesh. Now we see him as the Son of God, the one whose eyes are like a fiery flame, picking up from those opening verses in this document, whose eyes are like a fiery flame, whose feet are like bronze. And this really is dealing with the concept of judgment. And so Jesus is going to speak some very specific, direct words to the leader in the church of Thyatira. Notice verse 20 and 21. "But I have this against you." And there, and you will not notice this from the English, that's not a plural pronoun. Many times when you see the word you in English, translated from the Greek text, it's plural. In fact, most cases, it's plural. Second person plural. Here, it's personal. "I have this against you." You, the leader of this church. This is referring back to the angel of the church, the leader of the church. You tolerate the woman Jezebel. And we don't know who this woman was, but we certainly know that Jezebel represents evil. And we know that from the Old Testament story. A very wicked woman. She was the wife of Ahab, one of the kings of Israel. She led him into terrible sin. She was an idolatress herself. She led Israel and Ahab into idolatry, into immorality. And so he uses her name to illustrate this woman who was involved and influential in this church in Thyatira. And so what he's saying to this leader of the church, you've allowed her to take charge, to get involved, to teach, and there are people who are following her. So he says, you, singular, you tolerate the woman Jezebel, just like Ahab did when he tolerated Jezebel in the Old Testament, who calls herself a prophetess, who claims to be speaking from divinity, which obviously was Satan, and teaches and deceives my servants, slaves, to commit sexual immorality, to eat meat that is sacrificed to idols. I gave her time to repent. And by the way, this shows the heart of Jesus. In the Old Testament, God gave Jezebel days and years to repent. Even up until the time that she knew that judgment was coming, she did not repent. And she was judged severely. And just as Jezebel in the Old Testament, here in the New Testament, Jesus said, I've given her time to repent, to change. But she does not want to repent of her sexual immorality. And so Jesus said, judgment is coming. Verses 24 and 25 on in the letter says, I say to the rest of you in Thyatira, who do not hold this teaching, there are those of you who do not hold to this, who haven't known the deep things of Satan. You haven't dabbled in all of this demonism and evil, as they say, the things of Satan. I do not put any other burden on you, but hold on to what you have until I come. Don't give in to this horrible teaching, because ultimately you will be pulled into an evil, evil lifestyle. And so the question that's rather fascinating here, I think, is how did this leader respond? When Jesus said, I have something against you, you tolerate her. We're not told how he responded. Hopefully he responded positively. And by the way, at this particular point in time, Thyatira was one of the most prosperous cities in the Roman Empire. And I think that's significant, that sometimes within the element or within the context of prosperity is when Christians sometimes are led astray. We do know the church continued to decline. And we also know that it disappeared off the scene by the end of the 2nd century. So ultimately, this church in Thyatira, the lampstand was removed. The light went out in the city of Thyatira. So we could speculate that Jezebel continued with her evil teaching. The leader of that church continued to tolerate it, and eventually it destroyed the church. Ending on a positive note, reflection and response. How does another important woman from Thyatira compare to the false prophetess Jesus called Jezebel? We don't really know much about Thyatira from the Scriptures. We don't know how the church came to existence, except that people from Thyatira came to Ephesus. They heard Paul teach. They went back. They were believers. They started this church. But there was a woman who left Thyatira. Remember her name? Her name was Lydia. And she traveled from Thyatira, and she crossed the sea, and she went over to Philippi. And she was a very wealthy woman. She was the seller of purple and purple clothes. And we read about her in Acts chapter 16, where Paul, on the Sabbath day, he along with Silas and Timothy, went outside the city there in Philippi, by the river, where we thought there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women gathered there. A woman named Lydia, a Gentile probably, but influenced by Judaism in a very positive way. She was a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira. She understood all that stuff. She knew all about probably what was happening there in terms of this horrible doctrine, even though this was 20, 30 years before Jesus wrote this letter to the church in Thyatira. She worshiped God. She was influenced by, in a good way, by Judaism. And she was listening. And notice what happened. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was spoken by Paul. And after she and her household were baptized, we don't know anything about her husband. He might have been dead. She might have been divorced. Maybe that's why she moved over here to this city of Philippi. But she, Lydia, urged us, if you consider me a believer in the Lord, which she was, come and stay at my house. And she persuaded us. And as I was looking at the passage in the letter dealing with this evil, evil woman, Jezebel, I couldn't help but think of a very positive illustration of a wonderful woman by the name of Lydia that became very influential in the church in Philippi. Probably that's where the church first met, was in her home, opening her home, and she had a great influence on people in that city. Church discipline is really the theme here. As primary leaders in local churches, we are responsible to confront those who are leading people astray. And with that kind of responsibility goes accountability. And Jesus spoke very directly to whoever this person was who was the spiritual leader there in the church in Thyatira.